Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, AFR Talk. Reminder, if you're looking for the most comprehensive voter guide available, go to afaaction.net. Got apps for your iPhone, your iPad, and your Android. And don't forget, right here, same place you're listening right now, we'll have the most comprehensive election night coverage you can get, especially for values voters, right here on AFR Talk. You'll have a button on your iPhone, your iPad, or your Android. It says coverage. You click on that, press on that, and it'll access our live audio and video streaming. 888-589-8840, number to call, 888-589-8840. Let's go to Pete in Houston, Texas. Pete, you're on Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Hello?
Yes, Pete, go right ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I'm so glad I got in. It took me so long, but I got one as a question for you and the other is just a comment. There was you're probably familiar with it, a Bishop Pop Rocky who wrote a letter out to the people voting, and he said that, and I'm not Catholic, but what he said really spoke volumes to me. He said, if you vote Democratic, or if you vote for the one who stands for abortion, homosexual rights, gay marriages, and right on down the line, all this kind of stuff, that he said your eternal salvation may be in jeopardy.
Yeah.
The more I look at that, that's biblical. I mean, when we vote for somebody, we condone everything that they stand for.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't, I'm retired now, but when I worked, we had 360 employees. We had 4 pastors, a lot of elders, and a lot of deacons in there. When it came voting time for the president, they left their Christianity in the closet.
Mm-hmm.
And they voted for their money. Like I've heard so many people call in and say, well, I'm voting for my morals, but my husband is voting for his money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what they're saying is, I don't trust God to supply for me. I'm trusting in this president to supply my financial needs.
Yeah.
That's horrible. That's just, I mean, not only your money, you can't trust God with your money, but you're selling your soul to help promote the killing of innocent babies.
Yeah.
You know, and homosexual marriages. I just...
Well, you know, and I think it's a good point that you make, Pete. There's sort of a, you know, almost selling your soul to the devil if you vote for something other than your most deeply held values. You know, and it's hard for me. It's not rational. It's simply irrational for someone who is a Christian, who is a follower of Jesus Christ, and who claims that they believe in the Scripture. It is simply irrational, hypocritical, inconsistent, for them to vote for a candidate that supports abortion. You can't justify those two things. You can't put them in the same space. So there's got to be some kind of mental disconnect for somebody to be able to talk himself into doing that. Well, listen, Pete, I appreciate the call. You know, thank you for that. And, you know, the Roman Catholic bishops, they've been strong in this campaign, especially since the Obamacare, this abortion mandate came out. They say, look, the president is forcing us as committed Roman Catholics to violate our conscience or get fined. And the fine is stiff. It's like $2,000 a person. You don't do this thing, you could get fined and go to jail. You could be out of business. You're a Catholic hospital. You're a Catholic businessman. It's not just Catholic hospitals and Catholic universities that are under the gun now. It is every Christian businessman in America, Roman Catholic or evangelical, you name it. Anybody who has a conscience problem with abortion is now faced with severe penalties by this president. And there's just simply no way. I mean, there's no way to be consistent to your faith, your deeply held convictions, and vote for a president who is for abortion. You know, and the last caller reminded me of what Jesus taught. You know, somebody who harms one of these little children, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were thrown into the depths of the sea. Well, if you support a candidate who is going to protect that practice, you are complicit in the death of innocent babies. And Jesus says it would be better for you to be thrown in the depths of the sea than for you to harm one of these little ones, cause one of these little ones to stumble. So Catholic bishops who say, look, you're putting your eternal salvation at risk, I'm not sure I'd be ready to go that far today, but they may, in fact, be onto something. Well, let's grab a couple of sound bites before we go back to the phones, 888-589-8840. Let's go to clip number 5. This is David Axelrod, and we've talked about Ohio, how critical Ohio is. And let me play the Axelrod clip because In this interview, he's asked about what's going on in Ohio and what that's going to mean, and he's got no answer for it. Let's listen.
The key now is turnout, and the Obama campaign has talked for years about how strong your ground game is. I want to look at Ohio and what the Romney camp says is happening in early voting and absentee balloting. Let's put the numbers up on the screen. This is a little complicated, but I hope you can see the graphic. They say, this is the Romney camp, says that 557,000 Ohio Democrats have voted early or gotten an absentee ballot so far. That's on 155,000 from 4 years ago. 481,000 Republicans have voted early or gotten an absentee ballot. That's up 108,000 from 4 years ago. That's a swing of 263,000 votes in early balloting, which wipes out Obama's final victory margin of 262,000 in Ohio 4 years ago. What they're saying is that if substantially more Republicans turn out to vote in Ohio on Election Day, which is what they traditionally do, they're going to win Ohio and you're going to lose.
Well, I'll tell you what, Chris, we'll know in 2 days who is bluffing and who is not bluffing.
In other words, I've got no answer to that. I have no response to that. And remember, we talked about this yesterday. Major Garrett, we played the soundbite from Major Garrett. You have what politicos identify as low propensity voters and high propensity voters. Low propensity voters, you got to drag them to the polls. High propensity voters, they're self-initiated, they're self-motivated. They're going to get themselves to the polls and they're going to poll and they're going to vote. And the dynamic here is one of the reasons that the Democrats have done as well as they have. Their intensity is way off with early voting. Remember, we saw in the Chicago area down 57% early voting. This is what Democrats count on. They count on early voting. And what the suggestion is that the Democrats have already gotten all the bang they're going to get from their high propensity voters. Those are the ones they've been able to get to the polls to vote early. They've got nobody left. They've got no high propensity voters left to turn out on Election Day. Whereas Republicans, conservatives in general, we tend to vote on Election Day. Most of us, a lot of us, are just not fans of absentee voting. We're not fans of early voting. We see the potential for fraud. We like showing up on decision day after everybody's got all the information. We don't want people voting before they've even watched a single one of the debates. We don't want people voting before they've heard about this scandal with Libya and Benghazi. We want people to have all the information. That means we wait. We all vote on the same day. Everybody's got access to the same information. And a lot of those are high propensity voters. You and I are high propensity voters. We're going to turn out and vote. And far more Republicans who are high propensity voters wait until Election Day. So there's a lot more Republicans who will turn out on Election Day than Democrats typically. And what Chris Wallace was saying, and David Axelrod had no answer for this, the Republicans have already neutralized the Democrats' early voting advantage in Ohio. That's gone. The early voting advantage they had in 2008, that's gone. That's been neutralized. Now it's up to high propensity voters, and the Republicans have a lot more of those ready to go out and vote on Election Day than the Democrats do. Now, Ann Coulter, let's play clip 8. Ann Coulter's got another factor that has to do with this polling, the polling data that seems to indicate that things are about even. She says not necessarily so for a well-known reason. Let's listen.
Give me a break with this. The polls basically, you got to look at them. The polls basically have these states. It's a tie. It's a tie. Okay, whenever you have a tie, A, the Republican wins. Whenever you have a tie totally separately, the challenger wins. Also separately, you got the Bradley effect. When you have a white man running against a black man,
you really believe that?
And there's more now than ever before. Because Republicans are afraid to say, Americans are afraid to say they're voting against Obama because they'll be accused of racism. That is the point by the entire NFM. I mean, if you were a Tea Party, you're a racist. If you're against Obamacare, you're a racist. If you're against the stimulus bill.
And you think that has...
So Ann Coulter referring to the Bradley effect, and this is goes back to a guy by the name of Tom Bradley running for mayor of L.A., lost twice even though the polls showed him in good shape. And what people realized is when pollsters contacted him, because Tom Bradley was black, these voters were likely to tell the pollster that they were going to vote for the black guy because they did not want the pollster to think that they were racist bigots. But when they got into the polling place, it was just them and their conscience. They voted for the other guy because they thought he was more qualified. So a lot of that could be happening with these polls. I mean, you hear Chris Matthews and all the non-Fox media just hammer, hammer, hammer. You're against Obama. It's because you're racist. They don't want people to think they're racist, so they'll tell the pollster, look, I'm voting for Barack Obama, because they don't want that pollster, the guy on the other end of the phone, to think they're a racist bigot. But when they get to the polls today, they vote their conscience, and they believe Governor Romney, despite the color of his skin, is actually the more qualified of the two candidates. Let's grab a phone call before the end of the segment. Let's go to David in Columbus, Ohio. David, you're on Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Well, Brian, last Sunday I went down to the early polling place, and I set up 11 pro-life signs right on the corner, right where everyone drove into the early voting place. And these pictures are, these 11 signs are all pro-life signs. God hates the shedding of innocent blood, and God hates the hands that shed innocent blood. Proverbs, I think 16:7, if I remember correctly. And I had these signs depicting babies from 10 weeks old, little boy, to an 8-month-old girl with a full head of hair, with the head detached from the body, and also had a little black baby that was headless and with the umbilical cord still attached to it. But I had all these signs down there to show people the horror of abortion. Mm-hmm. And I had AP International come up and put a camera in my face and say, well, why are you here? And I said, God hates the shedding of innocent blood. It's written in the King James Bible. God calls it an abomination in the King James Bible. And I said, in ancient Israel, God took that land away from the Hittites, Jebusites, Canaanites, Philistines. Why? Because they practiced child sacrifice to gods of Baal and Moloch, and they also to fulfill the promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But I said, we've killed 55 million babies in this country. What's God going to do to us? And I said, Mitt Romney, I think, will do a better job than Barack Obama.
All right, well, listen, David, I appreciate that. And you know what convinced people of the horrors, and this is where these pictures, as gruesome as they are, I mean, that's just reality. That's just the truth. That's what happens. That's not photoshopped. That's what happens to a baby in an abortion. And what cured us of Nazism and the horrors of Nazism and white supremacy, what convinced everybody, even the ones that weren't convinced on the principles, just looking at the pictures of these corpses, these stockpiled, dumped in these open graves, the emaciated frames of these Jews, their gassed bodies lying in heaps. The horror of that got to the conscience of the entire world. And what David has done and others are doing by presenting these simple photographic evidence of what happens in abortion, doing the same thing today. Focal Point AFR Talk.